There's a parking lot at John F. Kennedy International Airport where jets sit idle between flights. Empty asphalt. Delta planes casting shadows on concrete. Nothing special about it. Except this spot once held something extraordinary. Walk back to 1960 and you'd see something different. A terminal unlike anything else in aviation. 4 acres of elliptical roof suspended by steel cables. The World Port. Gateway to every continent except Antarctica. The home of American World Airways. By 1970, Pan Am carried 11 million passengers across 86 countries. The airline operated 150 jets. Revenue topped $2 billion annually. Its pilots wore Navy-style uniforms. Its stewardesses spoke 6 languages. The Boeing 747, the largest airliner ever built, bore Pan Am's blue globe on its tail. This wasn't just an airline. This was America's unofficial flag carrier, the company that connected New York to London before commercial jets existed. The outfit that flew clippers across the Pacific when most of the route consisted of empty ocean. Pan Am didn't follow the aviation industry. Pan Am invented it. Then, something went catastrophically wrong. By December 4th, 1991, those same terminals sat quiet. Gates abandoned. Ticket counters dark. The final Boeing 727 lifted off from Barbados that afternoon. Flight 436, the last Pan Am plane in the sky, when it touched down in Miami, 64 years of history ended. So how does the most powerful airline in history collapse? How does an empire that pioneered intercontinental flight, that survived wars and recessions, that defined the golden age of aviation, simply vanish? The answer lies in a series of decisions. Some brilliant, most disastrous, a story of conquest and hubris, innovation and blindness, triumph and devastating failure. Welcome inside the boardrooms and cockpits where the greatest airline ever built destroyed itself. Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. This is the complete story of Pan American World Airways from its founding to its final flight. June 27, 1899. Seabright, New Jersey. A child is born into American aristocracy. The Trippe family traces its lineage to colonial Maryland. Old money. Investment banking money. The kind of wealth that insulates you from the world while simultaneously giving you the keys to reshape it. Juan Trippe arrives with advantages most men never see. Private schools. Yale University. Connections that span Wall Street and Washington. His first name suggests Spanish heritage, but that's misleading. Pure WASP bloodline. The Juan comes from a family tradition, nothing more. At age 10, young Juan watches primitive aircraft race above New York Harbor. The year is 1909. The Wright brothers flew 6 years earlier. Aviation remains experimental, dangerous, thrilling. Something ignites in the boy's mind that never extinguishes. When America enters World War I in 1917, Trippe drops out of Yale. He wants to fly combat missions over France, wants to test himself against death at 10,000 feet. But the war ends before he sees action. November 1918, armistice. Trippe returns to civilian life with flight training and no war to fight. Here is where most men would return to banking. Take the comfortable path. But Juan Trippe recognizes something others miss. Aviation isn't a stunt. It's infrastructure. The next railroad. The next shipping lane. Whoever controls the routes controls the future. His first venture, Long Island Airways, shuttles wealthy passengers from Manhattan to their summer estates. 1924. The business fails within months. Too primitive. Too expensive. No government support. But failure teaches him the crucial lesson. Airlines cannot survive as pure free market enterprises. They require subsidies, mail contracts, government backing. This insight separates Trippe from every other aviation entrepreneur of his era. 1925. Congress passes the Kelly Act, the Airmail Act. The post office will now contract with private companies to carry mail by air. Music. This is the opportunity Trippe has been calculating toward. He forms Colonial Air Transport, tries to secure mail routes, moves too aggressively. His partners force him out. Spring of 1927. Failure again. But here's the thing about Juan Trippe. He doesn't accept defeat. He recalibrates, studies the board, identifies the next opening. 2 weeks after Charles Lindbergh lands in Paris, proving transatlantic flight is possible, Trippe is already planning how to commercialize it. Not as a stunt, as a business, as an empire. The pieces are moving into position. Within months, Trippe will make the gamble that creates Pan American Airways, the airline that will dominate global aviation for half a century. First, though, he needs a mail contract and a plane. And landing rights in Cuba. He has none of these things, yet. March 14, 1927, Delaware. 2 Army Air Corps officers, Henry Hap Arnold and Carl Spaatz, file incorporation papers for a shell company, Pan American Airways. Their motivation? Fear. A German-owned Colombian airline called SCATA is lobbying for landing rights in the Panama Canal Zone. Arnold and Spaatz view this as a potential security threat. Meanwhile, Juan Trippe is forming his own company, Aviation Corporation of the Americas. He raises $250,000, equivalent to $3.6 million today. His backers include Cornelius Vanderbilt Whitney and Averell Harriman. Money, power, political connections. A third player enters. Atlantic, Gulf, and Caribbean Airways. New York investment banker Richard Hoyt assembles this bid specifically to compete for the same prize everyone wants: the United States mail contract from Key West, Florida to Havana, Cuba. The Postal Service sets a deadline, October 19, 1927. First flight must depart by this date or the contract is forfeit. 3 companies, 1 contract. A merger becomes inevitable. But here's the problem. Pan American Airways has the mail contract but no planes and no landing rights in Cuba. Aviation Corporation of the Americas has the landing rights but no mail contract. Atlantic, Gulf, and Caribbean has capital but neither planes nor permissions. October 18th, 24 hours before the deadline. The companies haven't finalized their merger. Trippe doesn't have a plane that can make the flight. Desperately, he charters a Fairchild FC-2 floatplane from a tiny Dominican carrier called West Indian Aerial Express. 7 bags of mail. $175 for the flight, equivalent to $34,100 today. October 19, 1927. The floatplane departs Key West. 1 hour, 2 minutes later, it lands in Havana. Pan American Airways is officially operational. June 23, 1928. The 3 competing companies formally merge. Richard Hoyt becomes president of the holding company, but Trippe and his partners control 40% of the equity. More importantly, Trippe becomes operational head of Pan American Airways itself. This structure is crucial. Trippe doesn't care about titles. He cares about control. While Hoyt handles financial matters in New York, Trippe is free to build his airline empire without interference. The United States government, terrified of German influence in Latin America, gives Pan Am near total protection from domestic competition on foreign routes. The airline becomes America's chosen instrument for international air travel. Trippe immediately begins his conquest of South America. It's not gradual expansion. It's methodical territorial acquisition. He purchases dying airlines throughout Central and South America, negotiates landing rights with governments, locks down mail contracts before competitors even understand what's happening. September 1929. Charles Lindbergh, the most famous person on Earth, accompanies Trippe on a tour of Latin America. They're negotiating landing rights. Lindbergh's presence opens every door: Colombia, Venezuela, Peru. By year's end, Pan Am operates routes along South America's west coast. A forced merger with New York, Rio, and Buenos Aires line gives them the East Coast as well. Music: Santiago to Buenos Aires. Trippe controls the continent. The next target? The oceans themselves. March 23, 1935. Miami Harbor. A Sikorsky's 42 flying boat lifts off from calm water. Chief pilot Edwin Music at the controls. The aircraft climbs to cruising altitude and heads straight into the Atlantic. Not toward Europe. Not toward any destination. This is a test flight. Range. Fuel consumption. Navigation systems. Music's mission? Prove that Pan Am can fly from San Francisco to Hawaii. 2,400 miles of open ocean. No place to land if something goes wrong. No rescue if the engines fail. This flight succeeds. More tests follow throughout spring and summer. Each one pushes the aircraft to its limits. Some flights barely make their destinations. Fuel tanks nearly empty upon landing, but barely is enough for Juan Trippe. Meanwhile, engineers are working on Pacific islands nobody's heard of. Wake Island, Midway Island. These are specks of coral and sand in the middle of the Pacific. No infrastructure, no buildings, no people. Pan Am ships hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment westward on cargo vessels. Construction crews use underwater explosives to blast coral from lagoons, creating landing areas for flying boats. They build hotels for passengers during overnight stops, install radio navigation equipment. All of this before the first commercial flight has been approved. Trippe's strategy is audacious. He's not asking permission. He's creating facts on the ground or water that make government approval inevitable. August 17, 1935. The first Pan Am flying boat lands at Wake Island. Pilot Rod Sullivan successfully navigates the treacherous coral-filled lagoon. November 22, 1935. Music. The first official Pacific mail flight departs San Francisco. A Martin AIM-130 flying boat called the China Clipper. Destination: Manila, Philippines. 8,000 miles, 5 legs. Stops at Hawaii, Midway, Wake, and Guam. No passengers. Only mail and express cargo. This is proof of concept. November 29th, the China Clipper reaches Manila. December 6th, it returns to San Francisco. The fastest steamship takes 2 weeks longer. The fare, when passenger service begins, $950 one way, equivalent $20,779 in today's money, $1,710 round trip. Only the wealthy can afford this, but the wealthy are exactly who Trippe is targeting. October 21, 1936, the first passenger flight departs San Francisco. 46 hours to Manila with overnight stops. Passengers sleep in hotels Pan Am has built on remote Pacific islands. They eat gourmet meals. Service rivals the finest ocean liners. Pan Am names these aircraft Clippers after the fast-sailing ships of the 19th century. The name evokes adventure, speed, romance. The Pan Am Clipper becomes synonymous with luxury aviation. But Trippe isn't satisfied conquering just the Pacific. The Atlantic is the real prize. Europe. The transatlantic route is where the money truly lies. 1937. Trippe begins negotiations with Britain and France. Landing rights. Airport access. Navigation permissions. The diplomatic complexity rivals international treaty negotiations. Here's what nobody outside Pan Am fully understands. Trippe isn't building an airline. He's building an empire. Territory by territory, ocean by ocean. And he's doing it while every other American airline is prohibited from competing on foreign routes. The oceans belong to Pan Am. For now. July 5, 1937. Port Washington, New York. A Sikorsky S-42 departs on Pan Am's first transatlantic survey flight. Destination: Ireland via Newfoundland. Simultaneously, a British flying boat travels westward. They pass each other over the Atlantic. Historic handshake at 30,000 feet. March 30th, 1939. Baltimore, Maryland. The Yankee Clipper, a Boeing 314 flying boat piloted by Harold Gray, carries the first paying passengers across the Atlantic. 17 hours, 32 minutes to the Azores. Then 7 hours, 7 minutes to Lisbon, Portugal. Pan Am now controls both oceans, Pacific and Atlantic. No other American carrier can compete. The Civil Aeronautics Board, the federal agency regulating airlines, actively prevents domestic carriers from challenging Pan Am on foreign routes. Juan Trippe has achieved his vision: total dominance. The late 1930s represent Pan Am's first golden age, the flying boat era. Clippers crossing oceans regularly. Passengers dining on white tablecloth service while flying over the Atlantic. Pilots become celebrities. The uniform navy blue commands respect worldwide. Then, Europe explodes. September 1st, 1939. Germany invades Poland. World War II begins. Suddenly, Pan Am's network becomes militarily strategic. The Neutrality Act prevents Pan Am from flying to belligerent nations. But Portugal remains neutral. Lisbon becomes the primary escape route from Europe to America. Pan Am's Clipper service to Lisbon operates at capacity. Refugees fleeing Nazi-occupied Europe pay any price for tickets. Pan Am profits heavily from the war, even before America enters it. Then December 7th, 1941 happens. Pearl Harbor, two of Pan Am's key Pacific bases, Midway and Wake Island, become battlegrounds. The airline's flying boats are commandeered for military service. Pan Am pilots and crew fly supply missions. Airlift troops. The company operates 90 million miles of wartime flights, but this isn't charity. Pan Am bills the government. The war makes the airline richer than ever. When the war ends in 1945, the landscape has changed. The government will no longer grant Pan Am monopolistic protection. New competitors emerge: American Export Airlines, Trans World Airlines, United, American. All want pieces of the international market. Juan Trippe fights back politically. He proposes the Community Company Bill in Congress. This legislation would consolidate all American overseas carriers into one government-backed airline, Pan Am. Naturally, the proposal fails. Other airlines led by Howard Hughes's TWA successfully lobby against it. For the first time in its history, Pan Am faces real competition on international routes. But Trippe has one advantage. Pan Am pioneered these routes, built the infrastructure, trained the best pilots, established the brand. Even with competition, Pan Am remains dominant. The 1950s arrive. A new generation of aircraft is coming. Propeller-driven planes are giving way to something faster, louder, more powerful. The jet age is dawning, and Juan Trippe is determined that Pan Am will lead it. If you're finding this story fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue bringing you these deep dives into aviation history. We're just getting to the most dramatic part of Pan Am's story. October 1955, New York City. Juan Trippe sits in his office considering the future. Britain has introduced the de Havilland Comet, the world's first jet airliner. It's fast, sleek, but it doesn't have the range to cross the Atlantic non-stop, and the Comet has been experiencing catastrophic failures. Several have disintegrated mid-flight. Trippe sees beyond the Comet's problems. He sees the future. jet engines will revolutionize aviation just as surely as the Wright brothers did in 1903. Whoever controls the first successful fleet of jet airliners will dominate commercial aviation for decades. He makes a characteristically audacious move. Trippe approaches Pratt & Whitney, the engine manufacturer, orders $40 million worth of J-75 engines. These are civilian adaptations of military jet engines used on B-52 bombers. Experimental, unproven in commercial aviation, and he's ordering them before any plane exists to put them in. With this massive engine order in hand, Trippe goes to William McPherson Allen, president of Boeing, and Donald Douglas, head of the Douglas Aircraft Company. He tells both of them the same thing. Design me a jet airliner that uses these engines. I'll buy from whoever commits first. Allen at Boeing resists initially. The 707 they're designing uses different engines. Allen tells Trippe, take it or leave it. Trippe's response? Fine, I'll take 21. But on the exact same day, October 13, 1955, he signs a contract with Douglas for 25 DC-8s, and Douglas has agreed to redesign their aircraft around Trippe's Pratt & Whitney engines. When Allen discovers this at a cocktail party at Trippe's Manhattan apartment, he realizes he's been outmaneuvered. If Boeing doesn't modify the 707 to use Trippe's engines, Douglas will capture the entire commercial jet market. Boeing capitulates. They'll redesign the 707. Pan Am will receive 17 of the intercontinental version, plus 6 smaller models, plus the 25 DC-8s from Douglas. Total investment? Over $269 million. The largest aircraft order in history, equivalent to over $2 billion in today's money. This deal changes everything. Boeing and Douglas realize that propeller-driven airliners are finished. The jet age has arrived, and Juan Trippe forced it into existence through pure financial leverage. October 26, 1958, the first scheduled transatlantic jet flight departs New York's Idlewild Airport, later renamed Kennedy Airport. Pan Am Flight 101, Boeing 707. Destination, Paris. 111 passengers. 8 hours, 41 minutes. The world shifts that day. Ocean liners begin their terminal decline. The Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, the great transatlantic ships, will be retired within a decade. Air travel isn't just faster now. It's accessible to a broader class of travelers. Pan Am's second golden age begins. The 1960s. Jet-powered glamour. Pilots in sharp uniforms. Stewardesses chosen for beauty and linguistic ability. The airline's aesthetic defines the decade. Movies feature Pan Am planes. James Bond flies Pan Am. The airline promises service to the moon, literally opening a waiting list in 1964. Over 93,000 people sign up. Revenue soars. Stock prices climb. Pan Am operates the most modern fleet in aviation, 150 jets by 1970, routes to 86 countries. But beneath the glamorous surface, something is wrong. Costs are rising faster than revenue. Competition is intensifying, and Juan Trippe is about to make the gamble that will ultimately destroy his empire. The Boeing 747. August 1965. Puget Sound, Washington. Juan Trippe goes fishing with Bill Allen, Boeing's president. Not a casual outing. This is diplomatic maneuvering disguised as recreation. They're negotiating the future of commercial aviation while casting lines into the water. The conversation is hypothetical. Careful. Would you buy it if I built it? Would you build it if I bought it? The "it" is a plane that doesn't exist yet. The Boeing 747. The largest passenger aircraft ever conceived. Wide-body design. Twin aisles. Capacity for over 400 passengers. Range to cross any ocean non-stop. Trippe believes supersonic transport, the SST, will eventually replace subsonic jets. But the SST is years away, maybe decades. Pan Am needs a bridge aircraft, something enormous and efficient to dominate the 1970s until supersonic flight becomes viable. December 22, 1965. The letter of intent is signed. Pan Am commits to 25 Boeing 747s, plus spare parts. Total cost, approximately $500 million. 2.5% paid up front. More payments every 6 months. For Boeing, this gamble is equally enormous. They must build an entirely new manufacturing facility, the largest building in the world by volume, just to assemble 747s. If other airlines don't order the plane, Boeing will go bankrupt. April 12, 1966, the Pan Am Building, New York. Juan Trippe stands before the board of directors on the 46th floor. He's 77 years old, nearing the end of his career. This is his final grand gesture. His last empire-building move. He presents his projections. Air traffic will increase 15% annually through 1976. The 747s will operate at 30% lower cost per seat mile than 707s. Each jumbo jet replaces 2.5 older aircraft. It's brilliant efficiency. The board approves. This moment is the fulcrum, the point where Pan Am's rise tilts into decline. Trippe's projections are wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Air traffic doesn't grow 15% annually. It shrinks in the late 1960s and early 70s. The 747s, those magnificent giants, cross oceans half empty. Each flight loses money. Pan Am can't fill the seats. Making matters worse, the introduction of wide-body aircraft by multiple airlines simultaneously creates massive overcapacity industry-wide. Then comes the 1973 oil crisis. Fuel prices spike. Airlines with older, less efficient planes suffer most. Pan Am is vulnerable. High overhead, decentralized infrastructure, aging narrow-body aircraft consuming expensive fuel on routes that no longer generate sufficient revenue. May 7, 1968. The Commodore Hotel, New York. Pan Am's annual stockholders meeting. Juan Trippe presiding for the 41st consecutive year. The news is grim. Profits fell 21.5% in 1967. First quarter of 1968 shows a loss. Trippe announces his retirement. Harold Gray will succeed him as CEO. The empire builder is leaving just as the empire begins crumbling. By 1976, Pan Am has racked up $364 million in accumulated losses over 10 years. Debt approaches $1 billion. The airline is on the verge of bankruptcy. What went wrong? The 747 order was based on projections that assumed continuous growth. But the world economy doesn't grow continuously. Pan Am financed its future on optimistic fantasy rather than conservative reality. The empire that conquered the skies is now fighting for survival. And the worst is yet to come. September 23, 1974, the New York Times. A full-page advertisement appears, published by Pan Am employees, not management. The text is a desperate plea. Why is the American government allowing foreign airlines to undercut Pan Am? Why does Qantas pay $178 to land in Los Angeles, while Pan Am pays $4,200 to land in Sydney? The employees sense what's coming. Their airline is dying. William Sewell becomes CEO in 1972, replacing Harold Gray, former bomber pilot, Strategic Air Command veteran. Sewell is blunt where Trippe was diplomatic. He yells in meetings. Slashes cost brutally. Between 1972 and 1978, Sewell cuts Pan Am's workforce by 30%. 14,000 jobs eliminated, routes reduced by 25%. Planes sold, debt rescheduled. He's trimming everything possible to stop the bleeding. It works temporarily. Pan Am returns to profitability in 1977 through sheer cost-cutting. But this isn't sustainable. You can't shrink your way to prosperity. Here's Pan Am's fundamental problem. It has no domestic routes. Never has. The Civil Aeronautics Board has forbidden it for decades. But in the era of deregulation, this prohibition becomes fatal. A passenger in Chicago wanting to fly to London can book American Airlines from Chicago to New York, then American's transatlantic service to London. One airline, one booking. Seamless. Pan Am passengers have to book two separate tickets, one domestic carrier to New York, then Pan Am across the Atlantic. Inconvenient, more expensive, less reliable. Seawell recognizes the solution. Pan Am must acquire a domestic airline, build a feed system for international routes, but which airline and how to pay for it? October 24, 1978, President Jimmy Carter signs the Airline Deregulation Act. Music, this changes everything. Airlines can now fly any route without CAB approval, free market competition. For Pan Am, this means opportunity. They can finally enter the domestic market. But it also means every airline in America can now compete internationally. The protected monopoly is finished. Seawell sets his sights on National Airlines, a Florida-based carrier with domestic routes throughout the Southeast and to major hubs like Los Angeles and New York. National has some Latin American routes too. It seems like a perfect fit. There's a bidding war. Frank Lorenzo's Texas International wants National. Eastern Airlines wants it. Stock prices surge as bidders compete. January 7, 1980. Pan Am wins. Purchase price $437 million. The board calls it the coup of the decade. Financial analysts praise the strategic vision. Wall Street applauds. It's the worst decision in Pan Am's history. Worse than the 747 order. This acquisition will directly cause the airline's death 11 years later. Here's why. National's routes don't feed Pan Am's international network. Miami to Tampa, New Orleans to Houston. These are short regional hops that don't connect passengers to London or Tokyo flights. The fleets are incompatible. National flies Boeing 727s. Short to medium-range aircraft. Pan Am flies 747s. Long-range international giants. Different maintenance. Different pilot training. Different spare parts. Operational chaos. Worst of all is the cultural clash. Pan Am pilots are the elite. They fly across oceans. Decades of seniority. They're suddenly told they'll fly short domestic routes. Revolt ensues. National pilots expect rapid advancement. Their system allows it. Pan Am's seniority structure blocks everyone for years. When the workforces merge, neither side accepts the integration. Strikes, work stoppages, internal warfare. While Pan Am's employees fight each other, competitors capture market share. Delta, United, American. They operate as unified companies. Pan Am operates as two warring factions. The National acquisition drains $437 million from Pan Am's reserves. Money that could have modernized the fleet or built organic domestic routes. Instead, it purchases an asset that creates more problems than it solves. Meanwhile, costs explode. Fuel prices from the 1979 oil crisis. Pilot salaries from union contracts. Interest payments on massive debt. Pan Am is burning $1 million per day, and the empire's most valuable assets are about to be sold for scrap. April 3, 1981. New York City. Juan Trippe dies at age 81. 2 strokes in 6 months. The founder of Pan American Airways won't witness the final collapse. Perhaps that's mercy. Edward Acker replaces William Sewell as CEO in August 1981. Acker comes from Braniff and Air Florida. He's the first Pan Am CEO who was never a pilot. His background is finance, not aviation. Acker's mandate is simple: stop the hemorrhaging. Pan Am is losing $1 million every single day. Without drastic action, bankruptcy is months away. He begins selling everything. September 1981, the Intercontinental Hotel chain is sold to British conglomerate Grand Metropolitan for $500 million. These hotels were Pan Am's crown jewels, built on 6 continents. But they're gone now. 1981, the Pan Am building in Manhattan is sold to Metropolitan Life Insurance Company for $400 million. The iconic headquarters, 59 floors. The name stays on top for another decade, but Pan Am no longer owns it. The cash from these sales provides temporary relief, buys time. But it doesn't solve the fundamental problem. Pan Am's cost structure remains too high. Its route network remains unprofitable. The national acquisition continues generating losses. March 1, 1985, 4 of Pan Am's 5 labor unions strike. First major labor action in the company's history. Pilots, flight attendants, mechanics. They're protesting wage freezes, benefit cuts, and pension reductions. Acker hires replacement workers. The unions eventually cave after realizing Pan Am will simply operate with scabs. But the damage is done. Trust between management and employees is destroyed. Friendships spanning decades are severed. April 22, 1985. The ultimate betrayal. Pan Am sells its Pacific division to United Airlines, $750 million. The Pacific routes, the ones Juan Trippe pioneered in the 1930s, San Francisco to Tokyo, Los Angeles to Sydney. The Clipper routes across the ocean, gone. United gets the routes, the planes, the gates, the crews, everything. Pan Am keeps only the Atlantic and a few Latin American routes. A pilots' union representative says, "It's cutting off our right arm." What's next? What's next is continued decline. The Pacific sale provides cash but removes Pan Am's last truly profitable operation. The Atlantic routes, even the prestigious London service, can't sustain the entire company. 1988, Thomas Plaskett becomes CEO, replacing Acker, Pan Am's 3rd CEO in 7 years. Each one arrives promising turnaround, each one fails. Plaskett implements a refurbishment program. New seat covers, fresh paint on planes, improved on-time performance. Third quarter of 1988 is Pan Am's most profitable quarter ever. Hope flickers briefly. Then December 21, 1988 happens. 4 days before Christmas, Pan Am Flight 103, a Boeing 747, London to New York. 243 passengers, 16 crew members. 31 minutes after takeoff, while flying over Lockerbie, Scotland, a bomb hidden in a Samsonite suitcase detonates. The nose section shears off. The plane disintegrates. All 259 aboard die instantly. 11 people on the ground in Lockerbie are killed by falling debris. Total death toll, 270. The worst air disaster in British history. And it happens to Pan Am. The lawsuits come immediately. Families sue for $300 million. But more devastating is the public perception. Images of the Pan Am logo on wreckage. Broadcast globally. Endlessly. Nobody wants to fly Pan Am anymore. First quarter, 1989. Passenger loads collapse. 747s cross the Atlantic with 50 people aboard. 400 empty seats. Financial catastrophe. The empire is dying, and the final blow is about to fall. August 2, 1990. Baghdad, Iraq. Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait. Within hours, the price of oil spikes. Global financial markets panic. Airlines already operating on thin margins face disaster. Fuel costs explode overnight. For Pan Am, barely alive after Lockerbie, this is the end. Passengers stop booking international travel. Fear of terrorism. Fear of war. Fear of getting stranded overseas. Flights leave empty. Pan Am is running on fumes. Every asset of value has been sold. The hotels, the headquarters building, the Pacific routes. The company has no cushion, no reserves, no margin for any shock. December 1990. The European aircraft manufacturer Airbus cancels Pan Am's leases on 21 planes. The airline is over a year behind on payments. Airbus wants its aircraft back. This is the last straw. Without those planes, Pan Am cannot operate. The company will have to shut down within days unless something dramatic happens. January 8, 1991. 1 week before the Persian Gulf War begins, Pan Am files Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Bankruptcy isn't instant death. It's a legal process. A court-supervised reorganization. Pan Am continues flying while lawyers negotiate with creditors. The question is whether Pan Am can emerge from bankruptcy as a viable company or whether it will liquidate entirely. Thomas Plaskett, still CEO, begins negotiating with Delta Airlines. Delta is interested in acquiring pieces of Pan Am, not the whole company. Too much liability, but specific, profitable assets? Maybe. The deal that emerges looks like this. Delta will buy Pan Am's remaining Northeast routes, called the Shuttle, Boston to New York to Washington. Delta will also take the North Atlantic routes, New York to London, Paris, Frankfurt. Delta pays $416 million. In exchange, Delta will own 45% of a reorganized Pan Am 2, a smaller airline based in Miami serving Latin America and the Caribbean. Pan Am's creditors, including employees, will own the other 55%. It sounds reasonable on paper, but it requires everything to go perfectly. Passenger bookings must meet projections. Employees must accept wage cuts totaling $43 million. Delta must provide interim financing to keep Pan Am alive until the reorganization completes. October 1991. The deal is announced. A full-page advertisement in the New York Times. Thomas Plaskett's signature. Promises an airline generating $1 billion annual revenue. 7,500 employees. 50 aircraft. November 1991. The deal begins falling apart. Pan Am's revenues miss projections by nearly $20 million for the month. Travel agents stop booking passengers on Pan Am flights. Fear the airline will collapse during the holidays. Stranding travelers. A leaked letter from the Teamsters Union appears in the Miami Herald and Wall Street Journal. It reveals that the reorganization is failing. Public confidence evaporates. Bookings crater further. Thanksgiving weekend, 1991. Delta executives gather to make the final decision. Pump another round of funding into Pan Am? Or cut losses and walk away? The Soviet Union is dissolving. President George H.W. Bush goes shopping for socks in an attempt to display economic confidence during a deepening recession. The weather in New York is unseasonably warm. 68 degrees. Sunday evening, December 1st. Ron Allen, Delta's CEO, makes the fatal call. Delta will not continue supporting Pan Am. The deal is dead. Monday, December 2nd. Russell Ray, Pan Am's CEO for only 8 weeks, learns the news. Pan Am will shut down entirely. No reorganization. No Pan Am 2. Complete liquidation. Wednesday, December 4th, 1991. The order goes out. Ground all aircraft. Cease operations. 64 years. Ended in a day. We're halfway through this incredible story. If you're enjoying it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means everything and helps us continue bringing you these in-depth historical documentaries about aviation. December 4th, 1991. 6 o'clock in the morning. John F. Kennedy International Airport, New York. Captain Mark Pyle and First Officer Robert Knox arrive for work. They're scheduled to fly Pan Am Flight 219. Boeing 727. Destination: Bridgetown, Barbados. 4.5 hours. Standard route. They know Delta pulled out of the deal. CNN reported it the night before. But no shutdown order has arrived yet, so they fly. 9 o'clock that morning, the order comes down. Russell Ray, CEO, issues the directive from the Pan Am building. Cease all operations immediately. Get every plane and as many employees as possible back to American soil. At terminals worldwide, Pan Am operations grind to halt. Ticket counters close. Gates empty. A flight to the Dominican Republic boards passengers at JFK, then deplanes them. No explanation. The passengers sit in the gate area waiting. Nobody comes. Flight 219 is already airborne. Pyle and Knox learn of the shutdown order mid-flight. They land in Barbados on schedule. The passengers deplane. Then the station manager walks into the cockpit. He carries a telex from New York. Official shutdown order. All remaining Pan Am aircraft are to return to U.S. soil. This plane, the Clipper Goodwill, will fly to Miami, but there's a problem. Pan Am has no money to fuel the aircraft. The station manager promises Pyle he'll find a way. I'll buy the fuel myself if I have to. They wait. Some passengers want to return to Miami immediately, rather than risk being stranded. The crew decides to delay departure as long as possible, allowing people to collect belongings and reboard. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the 727, now designated Flight 436, takes off from Bridgetown, headed for Miami. While they're in flight, word comes. The Clipper Goodwill is the last Pan Am plane still in the air. Every other aircraft has landed. As a gesture of farewell, air traffic control requests the plane make a low pass over the field before landing. Captain Pyle agrees. The Clipper Goodwill descends, flies low over Miami International, then climbs and comes around for final approach. 64 years, 1 month, and 16 days since the first scheduled Pan Am flight departed Key West for Havana on October 19, 1927. That final flight carried no press, no ceremony, just a crew doing their job and passengers trying to get home. Pan Am died the way it had lived. In the air. Wings over water. Moving people between continents. When the wheels touched down in Miami, Captain Mark Pyle became the last pilot to fly a scheduled Pan Am revenue flight. He retold this story many times over the following years. By chance, history chose him for this role. The passengers walked off. The crew deplaned. The Clipper Goodwill sat at the gate. Another Boeing 727. Nothing special. Except it was the last. 64 years earlier, Juan Trippe had chartered a float plane to carry 7 bags of mail from Key West to Havana. That was Pan Am's first flight. A desperate gamble to meet a deadline. Now, in December 1991, the last flight arrives carrying passengers from Barbados. The empire that conquered the skies is finished. 7,500 employees lose their jobs. Many are near retirement age. Their pensions cut back or eliminated. Skills nobody wants. Decades of loyalty rewarded with pink slips 3 weeks before Christmas. The World Port at JFK sits empty. The Pan Am building in Manhattan still bears the company name, but that will change soon. The planes are sold at auction, the routes absorbed by competitors. The logo, that beautiful blue globe, survives only as nostalgia. What killed Pan Am wasn't Lockerbie, wasn't the Gulf War, wasn't bad luck. It was a series of catastrophic decisions spanning 2 decades. The 747 gamble, the national acquisition, the Pacific sale, each decision rational in isolation. Collectively, fatal. The empire fell because it bought the wrong airline at the wrong time for the wrong price. Because it bet on growth that never materialized. Because it couldn't compete in a deregulated market it was never designed for. Pan Am was built for a different era, protected monopolies, government subsidies, regulated competition. When that world ended in 1978, Pan Am had 13 years left, just long enough to watch itself die slowly. The last flight landed. The passengers walked away. The doors closed. The lights went out. And the greatest airline in history became a memory. December 9th, 1991. 5 days after Pan Am ceases operations. Southern District of New York. Pan Am's Creditors Committee files a lawsuit against Delta Airlines, $2.5 billion. The claim? Delta breached its agreement to save Pan Am. Delta's withdrawal killed the airline. Delta should pay. The case is extraordinary. Dozens of lawyers. Hundreds of witnesses. Mountains of documents. Every board meeting from 1991 is scrutinized, every financial projection examined. The Delta executives who made the decision to pull out are deposed. The trial doesn't begin until May 1994. 2.5 years after Pan Am's death, Judge Robert Patterson presides. The creditors argue Delta acted in bad faith. Pan Am met all conditions precedent. Delta simply decided it didn't want to complete the deal, changed its mind at the last moment, left Pan Am to die. Delta's defense is straightforward. Pan Am failed to meet revenue projections. The November numbers were disastrous. Bookings for Pan Am 2 fell 30% below forecasts. Any rational company would have withdrawn. Judge Patterson's opinion arrives December 23, 1994, 2 days before Christmas, 3 years after Pan Am died. Delta wins. The court finds Delta did not breach any agreements. Pan Am's failure to meet revenue projections released Delta from its financing obligations. Delta had no duty to continue supporting a failing airline. The decision devastates Pan Am's creditors. Employees hoping for severance payments get nothing. Pension funds remain underfunded. The lawsuit was their last hope for recovering something. Now that's gone too. Meanwhile, the Lockerbie families are still pursuing their case. July 1992. A Brooklyn jury finds Pan Am liable for $300 million in damages. Negligent security procedures allowed the bomb aboard. Pan Am should have detected it. The Lockerbie plaintiffs get in line with Pan Am's other creditors. Bankruptcy court will determine how much they actually receive. The process drags on for years. December 1993. The Pan Am brand and trademarks are auctioned off. Charles Cobb, a former diplomat and friend of the Bush family, buys them. He announces plans to restart the airline. Pan Am 2 will fly. Not the failed Delta reorganization, an entirely new company using the famous name. It launches in 1996. Small operation. 12 planes. Routes from Florida and the East Coast to Latin America and the Caribbean. Some former Pan Am executives are involved. It fails. 1998. Bankruptcy again. The second Pan Am dies after only 2 years. There are more attempts. A New Hampshire-based regional carrier uses the Pan Am name from 1998 to 2004. It fails. Another restart in 2010 out of Texas. It fails amid scandal. When the CEO is convicted of child pornography charges, the Pan Am name is cursed. Nobody can make it work. The brand carries too much weight, too much expectation, too much history. Every attempt collapses under the burden of what Pan Am used to be. In 2025, another attempted restart. Charter flights using a Boeing 757 leased from Icelandair. 50 business class seats, transatlantic routes for 2 weeks in June. A nostalgic tribute. Then it stops. Pan Am cannot be resurrected. The empire is dead. All that remains are lawsuits and failed attempts to recapture what's lost. The courts keep processing claims for years. Lockerbie families, creditors, employees, everyone fighting for pieces of the corpse. Eventually, the cases settle or dismiss. The bankruptcy closes. The lawyers go home, and Pan Am passes from legal proceeding to history. What's left? buildings that no longer bear the name, aircraft scattered across the world in other airlines' colors, pilots flying for United and Delta, employees who scattered to new careers, and memories. The Pan Am building in Manhattan becomes the MetLife building in January 1993. The giant logo comes down. The final visible reminder of the empire vanishes from the New York skyline. The Worldport at JFK remains operational under Delta until 2013. Then it's demolished. Now it's an empty tarmac, or Delta sometimes parks planes. The empire that ruled the sky left almost no physical trace. Gone as completely as if it never existed. Juan Trippe, the founder, the emperor. He died in 1981, 10 years before Pan Am collapsed. Perhaps that's mercy. Perhaps he's better off not witnessing the destruction of everything he built. His legacy is complicated. Trippe created international commercial aviation as we know it, the routes, the infrastructure, the model. Before Pan Am, airlines were regional curiosities. After Pan Am, they were global utilities. But Trippe also created Pan Am's fatal weaknesses. The refusal to develop domestic routes when he could have. The aggressive expansion that overextended the company. The assumption that monopoly protection would last forever. The 747 order based on fantasy projections. His genius and his hubris are inseparable. You cannot separate the rise from the fall. They're the same man making the same kinds of decisions. Some worked. Some destroyed the company. Najib Halabi, the CEO in the early 1970s. Former head of the FAA under Kennedy, he tried to save Pan Am but lacked the political capital. After leaving the airline in 1972, he went into aviation consulting. His daughter, Lisa Halabi, married King Hussein of Jordan in 1978. She became Queen Noor. Halabi himself died in 2003. William Sewell, the CEO who replaced Halabi, former bomber pilot. He cut costs brutally, slashed workforce, survived the 1970s through sheer ruthlessness, then made the National Airlines acquisition that doomed the company. Sewell died in 2005 in Arkansas. I could find no information on his later life. Edward Acker, CEO from 1982 to 1988. He sold off Pan Am piece by piece. The hotels, the headquarters building, the Pacific routes. He worked for 3 airlines. All 3 went bankrupt. Air Florida, Pan Am. Later, Braniff. Acker is still alive. Thomas Plaskett, second to last CEO. He tried to engineer the Delta merger that would have saved the airline, watched it fall apart in 1991. After leaving Pan Am, Plaskett went into finance and sat on the board of Greyhound. He died in June 2021. Russell Ray, the final CEO. Hired in October 1991, 8 weeks later, Pan Am collapsed. Ray was the one who issued the shutdown order on December 4th. After Pan Am, he worked in aerospace. He's still alive. In December 2022, he gave an interview to a Pan Am history podcast. The link is in this video's description. The pilots. The ones who flew the Clippers across oceans. Many transitioned to United or Delta after Pan Am died. Some took early retirement. Captain Mark Pyle, who flew the last flight, became a minor celebrity in aviation circles. He told the story of that final trip from Barbados dozens of times. The flight attendants. The multilingual professionals who represented Pan Am worldwide. Many found work at other international carriers. Others left aviation entirely. The union representatives who fought during the national merger, watching decades of seniority destroyed, scattered. The mechanics. The engineers. The support staff. 7,500 people lost their jobs in December 1991, 3 weeks before Christmas, during a recession. Many were middle-aged or older. Skills specific to Pan Am's fleet and operations, not easily transferable. Some found new positions quickly. Others struggled for years. Retirement savings depleted. Pensions reduced. The human cost of corporate collapse isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in lives disrupted, families stressed, careers ended. The executives made their decisions in boardrooms, filed their lawsuits in federal courts, negotiated their severance packages. But the employees, the ones who actually ran the airline, they bore the cost. They always do. Today, more than 30 years later, there are still Pan Am associations, websites, museums, collectors who buy memorabilia. The Pan Am Historical Foundation preserves the airline's records. Why? Because Pan Am wasn't just a company. It was an idea. The idea that Americans could go anywhere, that oceans weren't barriers, that the world was smaller and more connected than previous generations imagined. Pan Am made that real. For 64 years, the Blue Globe meant adventure, luxury, possibility. Even now, decades after the final flight, people remember. People care. People mourn what was lost. The empire that ruled the sky left no physical monuments, but it left something more durable. Memory. The memory of what aviation used to be. What it could be. What, for one golden moment, it actually was. What killed American World Airways? Ask 100 people, get 100 answers. Lockerbie. The Gulf War. Fuel prices. Deregulation. Competition. Bad management. Bad luck. All true. All partial. The real answer is more complex and more fundamental. Pan Am died because it was never designed to survive in the world that emerged after 1978. The airline was built for a regulated monopoly environment, government protection from domestic competition on international routes, mail subsidies, diplomatic support for landing rights. It was infrastructure, not a business, a utility, not a market competitor. Deregulation changed the rules overnight. Suddenly, American Airlines could fly to London, United could serve Tokyo, Delta could operate transatlantic routes, Pan Am's protected monopoly vanished. But here's the thing. Other airlines adapted. United survived deregulation. Delta survived. American survived. They had something Pan Am lacked. Domestic networks. A passenger in Chicago booking a flight to London generates revenue for the airline on two legs. Chicago to New York, New York to London. If both legs are on the same carrier, that airline captures all the revenue. Pan Am could only capture the transatlantic leg. The Chicago to New York portion went to a competitor. This structural disadvantage proved fatal in a competitive market. The National Airlines acquisition was supposed to solve this problem. It didn't. National's routes didn't feed Pan Am's international flights. Miami to Tampa doesn't connect passengers to London. The operational incompatibilities and cultural conflicts made it worse. So what should Pan Am have done differently? Some options existed. Organic growth. Start small domestic operations in the 1970s. Build a modest feeder network around key hubs. New York, Miami, Los Angeles. Slow, expensive, but sustainable. Strategic partnerships. Instead of buying national, partner with a domestic carrier. Code-sharing arrangements, joint ticketing. This model works today. American and British Airways cooperate extensively. Pan Am and United could have done the same. Different targets. If Pan Am had to acquire a domestic airline, buy one with routes that actually feed international flights, a carrier with a hub at a major international gateway. Better integration planning, not just buying an airline, but planning how to merge operations, cultures, systems. Conservative financial management. Don't order 25 747s based on optimistic growth projections. Order 10. See if traffic materializes. Order more if it does. Flexibility. Options. Preserve capital. but hindsight is perfect. The executives making these decisions in the 1960s and 70s didn't have our perspective. They saw growth continuing indefinitely. They believed Pan Am's advantages were permanent. They operated under assumptions that seemed reasonable at the time. Those assumptions were wrong. The world changed. Pan Am didn't. Or couldn't. Is there a villain in this story? Not really. Juan Trippe made brilliant decisions and disastrous ones. Same person. Same judgment process. The 707 order was genius. The 747 order was catastrophic. Why? Timing. Projections. Luck. The national acquisition made strategic sense. Execution was disastrous. Is that Sewell's fault? The board approved it. Wall Street praised it. Analysts called it visionary. Only in retrospect does it look insane. The Pacific route sale. Acker needed cash. The airline was months from bankruptcy. Selling the crown jewels kept the lights on another 5 years. Was that wrong, or just prolonging the inevitable? Even the Delta deal that fell apart in 1991, was Delta wrong to withdraw? Their analysis showed Pan Am couldn't meet revenue projections. Why pour money into a failing company? Delta's shareholders would have revolted. Nobody made these decisions out of malice. Everyone was trying to save the airline. It just couldn't be saved. Not with the constraints it faced. Not in the environment it operated in. That's the tragedy. Pan Am didn't fail because of corruption or stupidity or laziness. It failed because the world it was designed for ceased to exist. And when you're a 70-year-old company with massive infrastructure and 40,000 employees and a specific business model, you can't just pivot. You can't adapt that fast. The dinosaurs didn't die because they were poorly designed. They died because the environment changed faster than they could evolve. Same principle. Pan Am was the dinosaur. Deregulation was the asteroid. The extinction took 13 years instead of instant, but the outcome was inevitable from the moment Jimmy Carter signed that act in 1978. Return to Kennedy Airport today. Terminal 4. Walk to where the Worldport once stood. If you look carefully, you can almost see it. The sweeping elliptical roof. The gates radiating outward. The blue globe logo on every surface. Almost. But not quite. It's gone. Demolished in 2013. Now there's asphalt. Delta planes parking between flights. No monument. No plaque. Nothing acknowledging that American World Airways once ruled this ground. If you search carefully, you'll find traces. An old advertisement in a vintage magazine. A boarding pass for 1968, sold on eBay. Pilots' uniforms in aviation museums. The Pan Am Historical Foundation maintains archives, but physical remnants aren't the legacy. The legacy is structural, behavioral, psychological. What we learn about scale. Pan Am proved that bigger isn't always better. The 747 order, the national acquisition, these were attempts to use size as strategy. But airlines don't succeed through scale alone. They succeed through network efficiency, cost management, operational excellence. Pan Am lost sight of this. Growing massive while hemorrhaging money isn't growth. It's collapse in slow motion. What we learn about acquisitions, buying another company doesn't solve fundamental problems. It often creates new ones. National Airlines didn't give Pan Am a domestic network. It gave Pan Am 2 incompatible fleets, warring employee factions, and billions in debt. The due diligence was inadequate. The integration planning was non-existent. The assumption that this acquisition would work because it had to work, that was fantasy. Business doesn't work that way. What we learn about adaptation. Companies designed for one environment rarely survive when that environment changes dramatically. Pan Am existed to serve regulated international monopoly. When deregulation came, the company couldn't adapt fast enough. couldn't rebuild itself for competition. The pace of change exceeded the pace of transformation. Once that happens, death becomes inevitable. Maybe not immediate, but inevitable. Pan Am had 13 years from deregulation to bankruptcy, slow extinction. What we learn about legacy: success creates infrastructure, expectations, mythology. All of these become anchors when conditions change. Pan Am's prestige, its history, its brand, these were advantages in good times. In bad times, they were burdens. The company couldn't make radical changes because it was Pan Am. How do you tell pilots who flew Clippers across oceans for 30 years that they'll now fly Miami to Tampa? You can't. But you have to. The contradiction destroys the company. The statistics tell the story. 64 years of operation, March 14, 1927 to December 4, 1991. From 7 bags of mail on a floatplane to 226 aircraft serving 87 countries. Peak revenue, $2.3 billion in 1970. Final year, complete collapse. Walk through any major airport today. You'll see Delta, United, American. All of them survived deregulation. All of them adapted. Pan Am didn't. Won't. Can't. It's gone. Aviation continues without it. Boeing 747s, though retired from passenger service by Boeing in 2023, still fly cargo routes. The technology Pan Am pioneered remains. The routes Pan Am opened remain. But the airline itself is memory. What's left is a lesson for every business operating in a rapidly changing world. Legacy is not protection. Size is not immunity. Success in the past doesn't guarantee survival in the future, and when the environment changes fundamentally, companies must transform or die. Pan Am chose transformation. Acquired National. Ordered 747s. Sold the Pacific. Made every move that seemed necessary at the time. It wasn't enough. The world changed too fast. The company's constraints were too severe. The debt too massive. The competition too aggressive. The timing too unfortunate. Pan Am is a warning, a reminder. In the corporate world, especially industries with massive fixed costs like aviation, there's no margin for billion-dollar mistakes. One bad acquisition can kill a company. One overcapitalized fleet purchase can trigger bankruptcy. One miscalculation about market growth can destroy decades of excellence. The empire that ruled the sky fell not from a single catastrophic event, but from accumulated misjudgments spanning 20 years. Death by 1,000 cuts. Each one survivable alone, collectively fatal. That's the story of American World Airways. Pioneer, innovator, empire builder, and ultimately, cautionary tale. The greatest airline ever built, and the greatest airline collapse in history. Both true, both permanent. The Clipper Goodwill landed in Miami on December 4, 1991, ending 64 years of flight. The empire died that day. But the lessons remain. For anyone building something great. For anyone building something great. For anyone managing legacy infrastructure in changing times. For anyone who believes that success today guarantees success tomorrow. It doesn't. Pan Am proved that. The sky remembers what we've already forgotten. That empires fall. That giants collapse. That nothing is permanent, not even the company that conquered the sky.